The sky was wrong. No thunder, no wind. Just a heavy stillness that made the birds go quiet, the dogs hide, and the elders sit up in silence. In a time before radars and weather alerts, these signs were enough. A woman would tie red cloth around her tree. A child would not be allowed to go hunting. A tribe would start moving, slowly, steadily toward shelter. Because they knew. They always knew. This is the story of how ancient people, across continents, read the whispers of nature, and how they survived storms we can barely predict even today. In a small village along the dry riverbeds of Ethiopia, a boy named Bahir sat watching the goats. He was young, barely 9, but already trusted with the herds. The elders told him to watch for signs, not in the sky, but in the animals. That morning, the goats refused to graze. The air smelled like stone and metal. The insects had disappeared, and the sun was sharp, too sharp. His grandmother, Hawa, came and touched the soil with her palm. She didn't say anything. She simply nodded and began to gather her pots. By nightfall, they had moved the entire camp. The next morning, a sandstorm swallowed the valley where they had been. Bahir had listened to the dust. In the swamps of Florida, long before highways or Disney, the Seminole people lived in harmony with the wetlands' rhythms. One of their oldest stories told of a plant, sawgrass, that bloomed not with beauty, but with warning. When sawgrass opened early and wide, it meant the sea was stirring. A hurricane was forming. The old healer, Wahi, walked barefoot through the waters and checked the sawgrass by moonlight. If it bloomed early, the tribe would not wait. They would move their homes inland, use saw palmetto trunks to fortify their chickees, and stay low to the ground. Years later, modern meteorologists confirmed the bloom aligned with shifts in barometric pressure. But the Seminoles never needed instruments. They had instinct. Out on the wide-open Great Plains, the Lakota people watched the sky like scripture. To them, storms weren't just weather, they were spirits. The great thunder beings, or Wakinyan, were messengers of balance. They brought lightning, not to destroy but to cleanse. They were respected, not feared. Old stories tell of a young scout named Chaska, who once stood in total stillness as a thunderstorm approached. Others ran. He stayed. He placed his hand on the ground. He felt the earth breathe. Then he moved, fast, racing back to his village. "The storm does not come for us," he said. "It turns north." Thousands of miles away, between Australia and Papua New Guinea, the Torres Strait Islanders looked up. For them, stars were more than lights. They were clocks, maps, and prophets. The elders taught the children how to read stellar scintillation, how much a star twinkled. The more it flickered, the more unstable the upper winds. More flicker. Storms are coming. One evening, a young girl named Marita noticed that the stars weren't just twinkling, they were dancing. Her grandfather, the astronomer of the tribe, nodded gravely. "Monsoon early," he said. The next morning, they sealed their fishing nets and packed away their canoes. By sunset, the sea had turned violent. The stars had spoken, and it did. The Lakota had no Doppler radar. But they had generations of memory, passed down in songs and signs. Thousands of miles away, between Australia and Papua New Guinea, the Torres Strait Islanders looked up. For them, stars were more than lights. They were clocks, maps, and prophets. The elders taught the children how to read stellar scintillation, how much a star twinkled. The more it flickered, the more unstable the upper winds. More flicker. Storms are coming. One evening, a young girl named Marita noticed that the stars weren't just twinkling, they were dancing. Her grandfather, the astronomer of the tribe, nodded gravely. "Monsoon early," he said. The next morning, they sealed their fishing nets and packed away their canoes. By sunset, the sea had turned violent. The stars had spoken. In cultures around the world, storms were often alive. The Iroquois believed in Haino, the thunder spirit, who flew above the clouds with his bow of lightning. The Zuni spoke of rain priests who sang the clouds into being. The Japanese Ainu warned of Kamui Rusui, gods who punished disrespect with typhoons, and these stories weren't just fantasy, they preserved memory. A child hearing the story of a storm spirit learned when to hide, how to prepare, and when to move. Myths were memory devices, emotional, unforgettable, and full of survival. Today we rely on satellites, radar maps, and weather apps. But every year, storms still surprise us. Hurricanes shift suddenly. Flash floods arrive unannounced. Maybe it's time to listen again. Maybe the old man who watches the birds fall silent. The woman who feels pain in her joints. The child who smells the wind and says, "Something's wrong." Maybe they're remembering something ancient. The earth still speaks. The trees still warn. The wind still carries messages. But most of us have forgotten how to hear them. What ancient people knew wasn't superstition, it was observation, repetition, intuition, and if we pay attention, we might begin to hear those forgotten storm signs again.